Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I am apparently having 20 minutes to speak, and I will have to somehow make it short. That's what is a long story. So I would like to then probably start, rather than with my earlier life, I start in 1944, March 19th, when the Germans have entered Hungary. So as you can imagine, I come from Hungary, and by 1944, Hungary was in a very lucky position. Although there were many people killed, like 20,000 so-called foreign Jews were taken away from Hungary and killed in the Ukraine in mass graves. They were shot. These were the kind of Jews about whom you have heard, although you don't know that you have heard about them. Moshe the Beadle in Elie Wiesel's Night is one of these Jews who lived in Hungary and was taken away as a foreigner and was taken to Ukraine, and he witnessed the shootings of these people, and then he came back, and that is now another chapter in Elie Wiesel's book. I know one says Elie Wiesel, but he is Elie Wiesel. That's another. So what is important, that these people were killed, about 20,000 of them, foreign Jews who came from other countries fleeing to Hungary, because in Hungary there was no deportation yet, despite the fact that Hungary was a partner of Hitler, that is an ally of Hitler. But there were no mass shootings as yet. Then what happened was that the leader of Hungary, Horthy, Horthy, he knew very well that he has to play a double game, that is getting along with the Germans as well as with the Allies, because he knew very well that the war is lost, and he knew that he's going to, that Hungary is going to lose. So he kept the Jews. In many ways, he didn't give in to Hitler's urgings, and so the Jews of Hungary were untouched. But then the Germans came in because they were afraid that Hitler would make separate peace with the Allies, and so the Germans came in, and bear with me, this is really frightening. Never anything like that has happened. They came in on the 19th of March, the Germans. On the 5th of April, we wore the yellow star. On the 1st of May, ghettoization started. By the 15th of May, not quite 2 months after the Germans after the Germans came into Hungary, there started the deportation, and by the end of June, 500,000 Jews were deported from Hungary to Auschwitz. They all went to Auschwitz except 2 trains. And they were virtually all of them killed. There were 500,000 Jews, out of whom some 1,000 or 2,000 came back. In Budapest, if you have visited Budapest, there is a general lie about that there are still 200,000 Jews in Budapest, because from Budapest people were not deported. But it's not true that there are 200,000. I have asked some of the experts who tell me about 70 or 80,000 Jews live in Budapest today. There are no Jews in the countryside. So, in short English, we lived in Budapest, therefore we were not deported. In May and June and then early July. However, when the leader of Hungary wanted to leave the war on October 15th, 1944, he was taken over by a Hungarian National Socialist who started to kill the Jews in October, end of October, and by the beginning of January, when Hungary was liberated, there were about 70,000 people moved away from Hungary, Jews moved from Hungary or shot into the Danube. If you visit today Hungary, you see where the Danube River is, you see shoes, and these are the shoes of the shot Jews. I mean, it's a remembrance of them. Now, to be more personal than this, which gives a general description of what happened in Hungary, when we were little, I and my brother, we had a babysitter. Her name was Erzsi. That is like in English, Elsie. It's an Elsie, but the Hungarian version is Erzsi. Erzsébet for Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a girl coming from some Slovakian parents, from terribly poor family, and she had to go and work at the age of 12. Erzsi came to my father's pharmacy, where she became a girl who carried out medications to people who ordered the medication for themselves. She was 12 years old. But one day my brother met her, and he started to play with her, and he loved her. As a matter of fact, my brother was at that time maybe 4 years old. He fell in love with her, and he didn't want anybody else near him but Erzsi. And my father said, this is impossible, he needs her in the pharmacy, but my brother has insisted on it, and for weeks insisted, and started not to eat, and started to behave impossibly, and finally Erzsi stayed with us, and she was a kind of a babysitter. She came in the morning and left home at night. This was not in Budapest. We didn't live originally in Budapest. Then we moved to Budapest, and Erzsi wanted to come with us. And she did come, and she found her a job, and we loved her as we loved her when we were little. We loved her when she was more adult, and we were more grown up. And when the Germans came in, and my father said, everything is over, Erzsi said, it's not over, because I am going to save you. And that was a nice sentence, and I remember thinking that that's going to be wonderful when Erzsi saves us. But then at night, my brother told me, how is she saving us? She doesn't have an apartment, she doesn't have a house, she doesn't have anything. How can she save us? She doesn't have connections, she doesn't know where to go. I mean, how can she save us? So on the 5th of April, we had the Yellow Star, and from the beginning of May, we were not allowed to go on the street any other time, but for 1 hour in the morning between 9 and 10. So we were not allowed on the streets, therefore we couldn't shop. You can imagine at that time there were some 250,000 Jews in Budapest. If you allow them to shop 1 hour a day, what you see in the shops. So it is impossible. So we would have starved like most people, hadn't Erzsi come in every day and smuggling in food. She found a way to get into our apartment by not ringing the doorbell for the woman who opened the door, who was taking care of the whole house, but through the there were several ways leading through the garden and leading through the basement that she found a way how to get to our apartment. She bought us food. She told me again and again, don't worry, I am going to save you. And in the meantime, they started to draft every man between 18 and 45. And then at first, that's how they started, about in May, end of May, beginning of June. And then she said, I am going to hide you. And so I just thought of that what my mother said once desperately, how can she hide us? How can she, I mean, she doesn't have a house, she doesn't have anything. How can she help us? So we lived in that so-called ghetto house and were not deported throughout the summer of 1944. As a matter of fact, besides me constantly trembling that what my major problem was that my parents will be killed and what is going to happen to us. So besides this, we lived really relatively freely in comparison with other Hungarian Jews in this so-called ghetto house where Jews lived only. Some Christians who lived there originally were moved away. They moved away. They got Jewish houses and Jewish apartments, and there were people moved to us. So we lived in a 3-room apartment, and we lived there 14 people. So, and we were very lucky. I don't tell you the story how it came, but 14 people we were at the end. And in most apartments, there were of similar size, there were 16, 18, 20 people. So living there and hoping for the end of the war, which was really very close, you know, that was the summer of 1944. The Allies already arrived in Normandy. They started to push towards Western Germany. They already took France. They started to take Belgium. The Russians were already almost in the Hungarian, at the Hungarian border. There was from the east, so there was great hope and great reliance on the fact that the war will end in a minute. So, but the war went on still because the Germans just kept on fighting, or thought that they are keeping on fighting. And what happened was that we stayed in that ghetto house, and one day the leader of Hungary, Horthy, has decided that he sues for armistice. So he decided to create an armistice which will stop the war. And he has declared that in the radio. Within 2 hours, a Hungarian nationalist, Szálasi was his name, took over, and the new period of killing of people started. That means men were again drafted between 15 now and 60, and they were marched towards Germany. If you look at the map, you see that from Hungary basically to Austria, which was at that time Germany, the way is something 160 miles. So it is they thought that they are making people walk there or shooting them on the way. They shot most of them on the way. They drafted women between the age of 18 and 50, and they did the same. So many women and many men, about 70,000, died this way, shot on the walking way towards Austria. So we then went, better to speak, let me tell you this way, the Swedish embassy, the Swiss embassy, the Vatican, strangely enough for the first time in history, has given passports for Hungarian Jews. Now, you must not take this 100% seriously. Some passports were given, but there were many passports that were falsified. Who did this? Zionist young men and women who falsified passports in the way in which the Swiss, the Swedish, the Vatican passports looked like. And in this way, you probably have heard about Valon Berg, the great Swedish man who has saved thousands of Jews by going to the train stations and stopping the trains and saying that these people are Swedish citizens. They were Swedish citizens as you are, but Wallenberg has had in his hand your dates from a sister or a mother or a father or from somebody. So there were the names, and it was signed by who knows whom. And so they let these people go. So he saved thousands of people. Still, most of them were taken away, walked, or taken by train. My father was taken, but he fled in 1 week under miraculous circumstances. He had money sewn by my mother into his coat, in the inside. And so he went to the station and bought for himself tickets. And there were large number of people, so they didn't look at my father's particular papers more carefully. So my father got from a village to Budapest. And in Budapest, at this point of history, the stations were always full of National Socialists who asked for the identification papers of everybody. But my father got away with it. I don't know how. It was a miracle. And then he got home, and we were at home at this point of history. But it turned out that the National Socialists are now taking people to the streets and shooting them on the streets, or taking them to the Danube River and shooting them there into the river. So there was Erzsi, who was there throughout the whole summer, who came in, always told us news, bought us food, bought me and my brother chocolate. Unbelievable treasure during this time of history. So then Erzsi left the house and said, you go to this and this pharmacy where I know the owners, and you know the owners too, but I don't know what they would do for you. But for me, they promised that they would hide you for 2 days. So you go there, and I try to get for you Vatican papers. So at that time, the embassy of the Vatican, as well as the embassy of Sweden and Switzerland, and even Spain and Portugal, was giving out false passports And I mean some original passports, but also falsified passports. And so Erzsi went to a Vatican house, to the Vatican embassy, and she was standing there online. Huge, many thousands of people stood there online. Then a Hungarian National Socialist tank came and started to shoot those standing in line. Most of them died. Erzsi stayed alive. Erzsi got the Vatican paper, and the Angelo Abotta, the head of the Vatican embassy, told her, "You cannot go now on the street. Who knows what they are going to do? You will get false papers," he told Erzsi, "from us. And when next people go from us away, you go with them." So this is what Erzsi did. Next day we were in that pharmacy, we got the passports, the Vatican passports. And we went to live in a Vatican house. We lived there for 2 weeks when the National Socialists came to gather us and take us to the ghetto. There came in a policeman. They were all horrific. But one came into our bedroom. There were some 49 people in that apartment, but we had a tiny little room at the end of the apartment, and so there we were, the 4 of us. So he came in and he said, "You lie down," he told it to my father, "and you stay here as his nurse," he told to my mother. "They are not going to do anything today with you, but let the children go to the ghetto. They are not going to be killed right now, at least for sure. They are going to be collected in the ghetto." So Ivan, my brother, and I, we went to the ghetto. The ghetto was still open. It was not locked. That is, there were still some soldiers who asked for your identification. 2 days later, Erzsi came in with false identification papers. She found our apartment where we were. You ask me, how did she found it? She found it because there was somebody whom we saw on the street, and he said, "I am going out, I am not Jewish." And my brother said, "Would you just take this letter with you?" It was a letter addressed to Erzsi, which told our address. So Erzsi came and knew our address and got us. And she told those who asked for identification paper, number one, she had false identification papers for us. Second, she said, these are my cousins, and I just came in to visit them, and now they want to come out and see the city. So they are from the countryside, so let them out. And that National Socialist let us out. And so we went out. And then I went to a cloister where nuns were, my brother to another place. In a few days, I had to leave the cloister because I told them that I am Jewish and not Christian, as my false papers said. And they thought that it is better if I go away because I might bring problems to other children who are also there. And so Erzsi was notified. Erzsi came to pick me up. From that time on, I don't tell you in details, but I was in some 17 places. From that time on, until she took me to my parents, whom she found a place in a so-called White Cross hospital. What a White Cross hospital is, I don't know until today's day. I couldn't tell you, and if you can tell me, I would give you a lot of my love. I don't know what it is, But we tried to find out after the war, and the best explanation we came up with that it was just a name. Somehow these two was created by Zionists, which is either true or not true, but I don't know what White Cross is. Anyway, she took my parents also from place to place. Finally, she took them to this White Cross hospital where there were many Jews. Then she took me there, and at the end, on the 2nd of January 1945, she took my brother. And so there we lived in the basement of that hospital while the Russians bombed Budapest day and night. All of these walks that we had was already during the time of terrible bombings. You have to know, and you can look it up, that Budapest was the 8th most bombed city during the Second World War. During these bombings, Erzsi was walking with me and my brother, or alone with my brother, or alone with me, and with my parents. There were no people on the streets except those who were running for food. So she took us to the White Cross, one by one, to the White Cross hospital, where we survived. And the Russians came in on January 1945, on the 17th of January. And we were freed. And my father said it's better not to yet go on the streets because who knows what is going on. And my brother said, nothing is going on. Here are the Russians. We have to go home immediately. And he convinced us that we have to walk home. As we walked, there were all these corpses alongside the road, all these bombed down cars and bombed down houses. I don't think we saw a single house that was not bombed down, and a single step where there were no corpses, dead horses, corpses, whatever you can imagine. And then finally, I don't know how long it took. Some people have asked me several times how long did this walk last. I have no idea. It could have lasted an hour, it could have lasted 1.5 hours, I don't know. But we walked into our street, and as we walked in, there was a little figure coming from afar, running towards us. It was Erzsi. She said, I knew that you are coming home today. That is nice.
Visit www.marchofremembrancehouston.org, www.marchofremembrance.org for information on an event in your area. Here, Holocaust survivors, World War II veterans, and/or their families share their experiences as victims and liberators. Experience heartfelt testimonies, healing, and hope. Rise up and march against today's anti-Semitism. Marchofremembrance.org, marchofremembrancehouston.org.